Kamala Harris won the U.S. elections. Bombshell report claims voting machines were tampered with before 2024. Last year, Smart Elections had their legal group, Smart Legislation, file a lawsuit. They are a nonpartisan election security group. They challenged the honesty of the 2024 presidential election. The case, it goes before court on September 22nd. Unlike the lawsuits using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to remove candidates from the ballot, this case, it's not trying to disqualify 47. Instead, it's highlighting specific voting irregularities at the local level. Specifically, the discrepancies between the number of ballots cast and the number of votes recorded. They argue that these inconsistencies justify extra investigation, particularly a full audit of the voting machines and the data that came out of Rockland County. I encourage you to take a moment to read their press release. It links to a lot of information about the case, including the court filings. And as always, well, except for last week, I've linked my resources in the video description. By the way, I'm Kina. I talk about hard things with a soft voice. By the end of this video, you will understand why this case is so important. Okay, pause. This video isn't about whether or not Kamala won. It's about effective political action that you can take, no matter which end of the political spectrum you fall on. As always, the conversation continues in the comments, but keep it cute. Certain election districts reported vote totals that had anomalies. In some precincts, voting machines recorded 0 votes for president. That's even though votes were cast and counted for other races on the ballot, like Senate and Congress. Voters submitted sworn affidavits stating that they voted for Kamala Harris, yet their votes were not reflected in the results. Smart legislation is requesting a full audit of Rockland County's election data. That's including access to digital ballot images and internal system logs. This case is important now that the judge approved full discovery, allowing the examination of machine logs and poll tapes and ballots. This represents exactly the kind of approach that makes civic resistance effective. It uses established procedures to demand transparency and accountability. The Rockland case actually reveals broader patterns. Data analysts, they actually found serious drop-offs in presidential votes across swing states. Drop-off is when voters cast votes for down ballot races like Senate and Congress, but they leave the presidential race blank. Somehow, these drop-offs consistently affected one candidate more than others, and this raises questions about systemic issues rather than random voter behavior. In Erica Chenoweth's research on civil resistance, one concept that stands out is the 3.5% rule. It suggests that if 3.5% of the population actively participates in nonviolent resistance, significant political change becomes possible. This lawsuit isn't a mass protest, but it aligns with the spirit of organized civil resistance. Ordinary voters without special status or political office, they're using legal mechanisms to hold systems accountable. What they're doing shows how democratic participation has to extend past election day. It's no longer good enough to go out and vote. We have to involve ourselves in the system, even if it's inconvenient. Nonviolent resistance often works precisely because it allows more people to take part, filing a lawsuit, submitting public records requests, maybe even attending public meetings. They don't feel dramatic, but they're powerful. Studies consistently show that nonviolent movements tend to be more successful than violent ones. It's because they encourage broader participation. And it also reduces the risk of people involved getting hurt. Smart legislation are acting through formal legal channels. These are the things that get public support. They also reinforce what we value in a democracy. This case isn't challenging the system per se. It's really challenging how well the system is upholding its own rules. They've asked the court to allow them to inspect voting machines. They want to review logs. They want to verify whether the reported vote totals match the actual ballots cast. These things, they're not disruptive. They're actually measured. They're requests for transparency and accountability. The case, it gains more weight from discoveries about the voting technology itself. Leading up to the 2024 election, election systems and software, ESS, machines received software updates. The updates were classified as minor. These machines are used in over 40% of US counties, including major swing states. Because the updates were classified as minor meant no public hearings, no full certification review, no independent testing. because it wasn't required. The updates, they were approved by ProVNV, Professional Verification and Validation. It's a federally certified testing labs. These updates affected how ballots were scanned. They affected how audit logs were generated, also how results were reported. This kind of systematic documentation strengthens the nonviolent approach. Rather than making broad accusations, they pointed to specific technical changes. They focused on statistical patterns and procedural gaps. The power of their case, it lays in careful evidence gathering. Chenoweth, she also discusses the idea of the backfire effect. It's when institutions respond to peaceful dissent with excessive resistance or secrecy. It often causes public support to shift towards the dissenters. Transparency becomes not just a principle, but it actually becomes a part of the strategy. I think we saw a bit of the backfire effect in LA over the past couple weeks. The response was outsized to what was actually happening. It changed the perception of a lot of people. It actually inflamed dissent. In Rockland County, they are not demanding new elections or pushing unfounded claims. They are requesting documentation. They want audits. They want access to the evidence that underlies the certified election results. They are asking for a closer look at the vote tallies. If officials deny or delay these requests without adequate explanation, it's going to draw more attention. Public confidence in elections depends on the visibility of the process, especially when voters come forward and say that their votes may not have been counted. Regardless of the eventual legal outcome, a transparent response to this lawsuit would serve the public interest. Successful movements organize their actions in thoughtful sequences. They start with achievable goals, they gather their evidence, and then they escalate only when necessary. This case reflects that approach. This case didn't begin with sweeping accusations. They started by requesting records and analyzing available data. When voter affidavits and statistical analysis revealed gaps or raised new questions, they moved to legal action. This case, it's now in discovery. It's a phase that allows evidence collection. That alone is a form of progress. If they succeed in gaining access to machine logs or ballot images, it may reveal whether the drop off patterns in multiple states are connected to the software updates made to ESS machines. Smart legislation have kept their focus local and very data driven. Their success in court creates a template that others can follow in their own jurisdictions. Chenoweth's research, it suggests that violent resistance often harms a movement's chances. It alienates potential allies. It also obscures the core message. The Rockland lawsuit avoids all the traps that undermine civic movements. It's specific and it's based on documented irregularities. Whether or not they win, they are using one of the strongest tools available in a democratic society. They're using legal participation backed by systematic evidence. It demonstrates how individual citizens can identify problems, gather evidence to demand accountability. The fact that similar statistical anomalies appeared across multiple states using the same voting technology really indicates the potential for more civic engagement. When private companies make changes to electric when private companies make changes to election infrastructure without public oversight, you have both the right and the responsibility to ask questions. In your everyday life, economic participation is a tool that you should use. The 3.5% threshold applies to consumer action. You can express your values through how you spend, where you save, what businesses you support. And when enough people take action, we can influence systems that seem unchangeable. The Rockland County case won't reshape the 2024 election outcome. The election has been certified. Its value really lies in showing that everyday people can question outcomes. They can demand that institutions do their jobs properly. This case shows how nonviolent resistance principles apply to election integrity. Remember, it's difficult to affect lasting change alone or when too many changes or are made at once. I want you to be strategic. Total divestment from the corporate world isn't realistic for most people. You're watching this video on YouTube. Even partial shifts have power. Track your wins. Seeing how much you redirected in a month or a year is really encouraging. Every time you support a business that aligns with your values, you're reinforcing a better system. Economic power is really about how You use what you have. Every transaction is a signal. Every dollar redirected from harm to healing is a form of resistance. When enough people do this deliberately, they become the pressure that shifts the system. I want you to tell me your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already, and watch this next. It's the opening to a rabbit hole. What are you waiting for? Okay, bye.